Okay, we're ready? Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order.
I'd like to read a statement of apology. The hospital board requested this, but this is something that I wanted to do anyway. At the last meeting of the city council, in an attempt to provide encouragement and trust in the community, in our process, and in our hospital administrator, I used a mistaken form of levity. Having been on the receiving end of material misstatements about my person and called names in the past, I am sensitive to how harmful public mischaracterizations can be, and I am sorry for that. Without reservations, I am offering my apologies for any disrespect or pain that might have been caused by my comments, even if my intent was not to do harm.
Yes, and I'd also like to apologize for my involvement in a situation that was never meant to harm anyone. And I will try to work better from now on and not letting that happen. So, thank you.
Heineke, I also would like to apologize for any of my actions that have made Lori feel uncomfortable and or disrespected. So I'm sorry for that.
Okay, moving on, approval of minutes.
No minutes today.
No minutes. Changes to agenda. So we're just adding that, or what do we?
Yep, we're just adding the parcel and the amount of money that you guys are gonna wanna transfer if you want to do it, and the appointment, which wasn't there before.
Okay. So we move on to public comments under?
I think we're gonna start with the
Danielle?
city attorney.
Okay.
Certainly.
Danielle?
So I was trying to get a head count of what kind of time and procedure. So we essentially allotted the original meeting for about an hour, with more than 15 people being here. So original thought was about 3 minutes apiece, but that'd put us at 45 minutes. And so I want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak. So I think we're going to go aim for the 2-minute mark. And again, if everybody can be respectful of those 2 minutes, so then everybody has a chance to speak that wants to speak. I have had some discussion with Andrea beforehand, and while I know that there's some concern and they want to talk about some code of conduct, I just remind that the rules that how a board and a city council works when it comes to employee discipline. We're not allowed to do that in a public type of sector like this, and so it has to be noticed. And again, it's not timely for this special meeting here today, but I would note that there has been a request for it to be put on an agenda in the future. But again, that requires then for proper notice to employee, and they have the choice to make it a closed session. And again, that's to all public employees. So not that we're making any distinction, but again, those are the rules. And so again, I think my goal is just to have an open line of communication, but again, that everybody's mindful and respectful of each other. We have had emails. I would like to thank the ambulance as well as the hospital and the city. I had asked for questions in advance, and we've been trying to commingle and get the answers back that the ambulance has needed and wanted. And so if there's anything that's still unanswered, I would hope that we can address that today as well. And so I'm not sure, and I would probably ask the mayor, would you like me to prefer to read those questions within after we open the discussion piece, or do you want me to start with that now?
I would think I would say probably, if those are the questions they ask, maybe we should get that done right away. So
Certainly.
it might save somebody from needing to come up.
Certainly. So again, thank you for the questions, and I think we tried to get most of them. I know there's some that we still need HR to touch base on with the hospital. And I will ask, because I always speak quickly and a little low, can everybody hear me that's back there and out there? Okay. Have other options been considered for referendum funding, multi-agency alignment, or purchasing power, possible personnel collaboration? Referendum funding is a manner of which going beyond the municipality's levy capacity to fund an initiative. Much like what some school districts do when there's a great need for funding capital, a tax levy is increased for a period to fund said initiative. And there's some Minnesota statute reference. And again, this is on, I believe you put it on the city link, so you guys can all see this too. So I won't bore you with the statute citations. For example, in 2019, Appleton's taxable tax capacity was $729,858, and our tax levy was $1,507,788, resulting essentially in the tax rate of 205.627 net tax capacity. If the city were to pursue the referendum funding and request that taxpayers increase the levy for an ambulance service, let's say in request of an additional $160,000, which was the average about from last year, what that would do is go beyond the tax levy. And again, the numbers are in there, so not to bore you with those numbers, but again, resulting in a tax rate increase of the 21.92. Thus, the referendum was not considered because that tool would also then burden the taxpayers. The question was, high poverty rate was cited. What is poverty rate, and how many residents of Appleton are on assistance? The response from the city is the poverty is not measured by the welfare programming alone. Senior citizens, for example, might also be on a fixed income like Social Security and might not have enough to cover their personal expenses. The Swift County HRA states that Appleton has a poverty rate in about 23%. The most recent population figures for Appleton are that of the 1,356 people that live in the city. So that means about 311 of the city's residents are poverty-stricken. The question was, in reference to the tax saving example and other documents, how many properties in the city have a fair market value of $250,000 or greater? The answer was, the use of a home of $250,000 of value was done to illustrate the disparity between Appleton's tax rate and other cities. Those figures are plugged into the League of Minnesota Cities Property Tax Calculator, which uses the Minnesota UR figures. Whether an Appleton home is valued at $250,000 or $20,000, the tax rate disparity is the same. And so there's a link to this tax calculator. You're able to go actually put your tax home in there and to actually spit out the numbers. In the last packet that was put on the city council, they do have the split of all the cities to show where we sit for tax values. What is the average property tax billing in Appleton, and what is the projected savings for an average property tax billing in Appleton? Again, that's where, if you go to that link, you'll be able to specifically see how that would affect you versus other cities. The question was, does the Appleton City Administrator follow the same policies for all employees? Are there additional expectations, and how is performance measured and monitored? The City Administrator is subject to all the same policies as other city employees as stipulated pursuant to the contract. The city administrator is viewed annually like other employees of the city. The question was, does the city council follow the code of conduct? Is this the same as the city employees? How is that monitored and enforced, and is that reviewed annually? The city administrator is reviewed by the city council, and department heads submit the evaluations to the city council about the city administrator's performance to the city attorney's office. The city administrator is not aware of the statements that are submitted by the employees because they're anonymous, and so he does not see which statements have been submitted. Again, they are discussed during a closed session, as we talked about before, of how every employee has a closed session for their personnel reviews. Have all council members completed required training with the League of Minnesota Cities, and does that education include training or conduct unbecoming? All city council members at the start of the year during the first meeting are educated about open meeting laws, conflict of interest laws, and public meeting formats by the city attorney and city administrator. The program is provided by the League of Minnesota Cities, is also a valuable tool, but is not compulsory. The question was, does the city council follow the League of Minnesota City guidelines regarding the severance pay for the city administrator? Again, the League of Minnesota Cities is a forum that all cities get to use. I'd highly recommend it if you want to go and seek. It gives all kinds of answers to the cities. And again, part of that, they will actually cite back to the Minnesota statute, the references attached to our website. Again, the laws limit the severance pay to not more than 6 months of severance pay, and the city administrator's severance pay in this amount is for 4 months. What is the custom for answering questions that are asked of the council? Is there automatic deferral to have the city administrator answer? The City of Appleton's ordinances, and specifically the Ordinance 31, established that an administration department whereby the office of the city administrator and by the extension of the administration department handles all matters for the city council. The city council is not restricted from receiving inquiries. However, that is precisely the function and purpose for the city council meetings. However, if questions are of technical nature or require recommendations based on analysis, it's prudent that questions be submitted to the Office of the City Administrator. The question was, how is information for council meetings distributed by council members? By whom? Again, the answer was the Office of the City Administrator or the City Clerk Treasurer provide the City Council with information and the requests that are submitted. The question was, do you feel like the public is properly involved due to the COVID-19 restrictions? The response was, the constraints of the COVID-19 pandemic have required municipalities across the state and country to adjust. The proper guidelines that are in place to protect the public health have been implemented and voted on by the Appleton City Council. The question was, what is the city discipline process? The City of Appleton discipline process is identified within the city's non-union personnel contract. In general, consistent with professional standards and legal guidance from the city attorney, discipline is handled in an escalating manner provided the disciplinary event does not pose significant safety or legal concerns to the City of Appleton and its employees. And again, if there's policy requests, there's data practices requests that you make to the city, and the policies would become available to the public as well. What is the hospital discipline process? Appleton Area Hospital has a structured discipline policy and process, anywhere from coaching conversation, verbal warning, written warning, up to termination. It is all dependent on the severity of the situation. The question was, what is the timeline for transition? From the city perspective, the transferring of the Ambulance Services Administration to the hospital would necessarily be incremental. The first step is for the City Council to listen to the concerns of the ambulance service and hospital. Then the City Council would vote. If the vote is in the affirmative, as of January 1st, 2021, all ambulance revenues, expenditures, capital, and personnel decisions would be to the purview of the hospital. There is yet about 5 months before the transition occurs. In that time, necessary work will begin taking place to assist with the transfer. The hospital responded, directed towards the city, and that they were thinking on the resolution. Again, they believed 1/1 of 2021. The question was, what does transition look like, gradual or full on? Response, notwithstanding the City Council's potential vote to transfer the Appleton service, the incremental transition can only be gradual in the degree that the hospital requires. What policies, procedures, and general protocols the hospital wishes to implement for the ambulance service members is not determined by the City of Appleton, but by the hospital board that the city appoints to carry out such matters. And the Appleton Area Hospital is thinking everything would need to be in place by 1/1 of 2021 per the resolution. The question was, what is the hiring process? Already city employees, an application, other forms, what would the hire date be, and would be able to keep our longevity? Appleton Area Hospital, all current ambulance staff would go through the same hiring process as any Appleton Area Hospital employee does. This would include the application for documentation purposes, background check, drug test, orientation, etc. The hire date would show up as 1/1 of 2021, and yes, they would be able to keep longevity. There's a specific ask of how it would impact Cooper and Sam's retirement. We would need to contact Cooper and Sam, and it's a city question. We can deal with that one later. What is the structure of the department? Who's in charge, and what is in the hierarchy? The response was a city question for the current. Under Appleton Area Hospital, there would be an ambulance coordinator in charge of the ambulance, and the hospital director of nursing would oversee that person. The question was, what are the hospital policies? Will all policies apply to this department? How will HR be involved? The hospital has responded that's going to be a Kim question, so HR will be involved in hiring, recruitment, discipline, etc., and HR is all a resource to employees. I did email Lori before and ask her if Kim was going to be here tonight, but she said that she'd be working on getting back to the ambulance on some of those questions that have yet been answered. The question was, how will discipline be handled? Who carries that out, and who decides if it is needed? Discipline would be dependent on the situation. It could be anywhere from having a discussion with an employee to correct a behavior or work practice determination. This would be handled by the ambulance coordinator and HR. If needed, the hospital director of nursing would be brought in as needed. The ambulance director would talk to HR, and they would determine what is the most appropriate action needed. There's a question for how the pay rate is set, and I think we thought we had answered that one, but again, I think we'll have to follow up with Andrea on that one. We forwarded over what the current pay rate, and everybody's aware about that. Are we eligible for benefits? Health, dental, and vision insurance come into play only if 60 hours or more per pay period. Call does not count towards the hours worked. Eligibility for PERA is if they make over $6,000 per year. Are we eligible or mandated for PERA? And PERA is a public retirement account. Yes, is the answer to that one. Is there a vested schedule is the question. Is there PERA in the 2019 audit? Is that a mistake? How to or whom was that dispersed? And is it prorated from something else? The response is there was in fact a PER charges from the ambulance service in 2019. One of the city staff members worked to assist the ambulance service in collecting debts owed to the ambulance service through the Minnesota DOR Revenue Recapture Program. The city of Appleton would formally deduct PERA liabilities from whichever department receives services from city employees, and the city administrator's office has now changed that because that was a confusing practice. The question was, how would uniforms be handled? Who decides the logo and who pays for them? Appleton Area Hospital will pay for and decide the logo. The question is, what was our employment status? Are we volunteers? Are we part-time? How are we employees of Appleton Area Hospital and AAS handled? How is it decided which hat you're going to be wearing and paid accordingly? And again, the hospital will have to get back to that, back to the ambulance on that, and Kim will be able to get us that answer. How will day-to-day operation be handled, and how much will the hospital be involved? Again, the answer would be day-to-day would not be different from much to the current. Picking up supplies, ordering supplies, drugs, etc. process would change, but otherwise very little. Lori indicated that she would encourage the ambulance to talk to Ann Jensen from Johnson Memorial as they are under the hospital, and they would be able to give some perspective from the ambulance side. The question was, how will budgeting be handled? How will billing be handled? And how will collections be handled? The ambulance coordinator would create a budget and would review with the hospital director of nursing. From there, both of them, with the Appleton Area Hospital CFO and CEO, would review together and finalize. Billing would be done by current Appleton Area Hospital business office staff. Collections would be the same by the Appleton Area Hospital business office and our third-party collection agency if needed. Is a new NPI needed? I believe that's the National Provider Identifier Standard. It's a health insurance portability. I've got the question right. Can the current NPI be changed, and how long does this take? The response from the hospital, no, a new NPI is not needed, and the Appleton Area Hospital can use the hospital's NPI. The question was, will our training format be the same and keep the NCCP model, and how will the training be funded? The response from the hospital was they do not see any changes to training except adding Appleton Area Hospital Net Learning funded through Appleton Area Hospital. The question was, will we have additional requirements from the hospital? Are those requirements for all employees that will be new to us? If so, how will those be offered? Will all outside day jobs and commitments that will be considered for mandatory meetings? Will that be considered for mandatory meetings? Will the time of day be considered? Can such items be worked into a regular monthly meeting? We are a cohesive group that works well together, but we are rarely all in the same room at one time. Again, the hospital indicated that's more of a Kim question, but net learning, yes. Forums would be optional due to full-time work for ambulance staff. And she indicated these are good to go to so you know what's going on at Appleton Area Hospital. The question was, how is ALS be handled? ALS stands for Advanced Life Support be handled. Will new paramedics be brought on board? How can RNs be utilized? And how will on-call staff be handled for an advanced life support transfer? The responses from the hospital, we would have to determine if there was a need for more paramedics and if there was interest. RNs can be utilized to do the ALS transfers. We would need to work with staff to provide training so there's familiarity with the ambulance equipment, location of the O2, the supplies, etc. And then there's a question about understanding the last question. I have not had a chance to follow up with Lori on that one. The question was, how will staffing be handled? Ambulance coordinator will work closely with the hospital director of nursing and HR for recruitment and hiring. Question is, will we have the same medical director, and what will the medical director role be? Again, the answer is yes, it will be the same, and it would still be Dr. Bajwa. Who will own the hall and rigs, and will that still be where rigs are housed? Is the hall ours to use? Response from the hospital is the property will continue to be owned by the city just like all Appleton Area Hospital property is. The hall and rigs will be Appleton Area Hospitals, and yes, the rigs will still be there and the hall to be used as the ambulance hall. The question was who will maintain the rigs? And the response is we'll maintain the rigs per the city council meeting. Who will fund the new rigs and capital expenses and equipment? Appleton Area Hospital, and the county puts in dollars also. Who will maintain the hall? Ambulance crew like normal, and also other Appleton Area Hospital staff. Question is who will be allowed to use the hall? We would need to, the response is we will need to sit down and go over who all does currently, Appleton Area Hospital and ambulance staff for sure. The question was, where will city employees that currently sleep here, will that continue? The response from the hospital is possibly not. We need to have more detail on that. The question was, where will casual members be able to stay? And question of other hospital employees. The response was, I don't think I understand this right, but able to stay, like sleep at the hall was the question. And again, I don't know if Lori had a chance to follow up with you on that one. Who will order supplies? The response is we'll go through Appleton Area Hospital, ambulance coordinator, or designated ambulance staff. Who will pay for those supplies? Response is Appleton Area Hospital. How will medications be handled? For ALS and BLS, which is advanced life support versus basic life support. And the response is drugs will be purchased through Appleton Area Hospital pharmacy. One of the questions, what happens to the Relief Association and bylaws? Appleton Area Hospital does not think anything, would like legal counsel though. Again, I took a brief look at that. I don't think it'll be affected, but I still have, I have a call into Lori and we'll have to look at that a little bit closer. Question was, how will initial training for new members be funded in the interim going forward? And the response is through Appleton Area Hospital. The question is, how will the license with the Emergency Medical Service Regulatory Board, so the EMS-RB, have to change? And how long does this change take? Is there an additional cost? The response is Appleton Area Hospital is not sure on this. Jake can find out if given more information on the ambulances or information with the EMS-RB, license and license number, etc. And again, I would assume this would stay under the MD, but we will look further into that one. Question was, who will be additional helpers? Lift assistants, driving, how is this liability handled? Response is Appleton Area Hospital is thinking the fire department would continue to assist. Liability to stay with the fire department was Jake's assumption. We will talk to Ann Jensen and Dawson about their process and if the fire department bills their ambulance. The next question was, is the city going to commit funding to the new department in full for a period of time? Will these fund the losses? And the question of what period of time? The response is city administrator has requested that the city council consider an upfront transfer of $30,000 on January 1st, 2020 to help offset potential losses. And so those were the questions. And again, I think for the most part, certainly.
I'm going to tell you, I heard maybe 1 of 30 words talking through that mask. It was all just mumble. I have no idea what you just got done saying. We don't have any notes to go by what you had, so I have no idea what you just talked about.
Okay. And certainly I wish you would have interrupted me sooner. But again, this is all online. The responses are online. And so
I don't have a computer, thank you.
if you would like my copy, you can certainly have mine when I'm done.
Sure.
Okay? So if I want to probably turn it over to you guys to open it up to public comments, if you'd like.
Okay, we'll open the meeting up to public comment. And like we'd like to say, if we could keep it to a minute or 2 minutes, just so everybody that wants to speak can. And try to keep it calm and so everybody can get their views out, so.
And please come up to the microphone.
Yeah, can you come up to the microphone?
Hi there, I'm Matt Tollefson, citizen of Appleton here. So in the packet for the last meeting, Canby, Clara City, Dawson, and Madison were all cited as peers. So I'm curious how the ambulance service in these cities are structured. Are they contracted out? Are they under their community hospital, or are they under the city? For those that are under the city, why is our tax bill or rate that's being referenced as the main reason for wanting to move this service, why is it so much higher than these peers that have been identified? Thank you.
We want to know why our tax rate is so much higher. In Appleton, we are struggling with having lost one of our major economic drivers. Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know where to take this mask off. I feel what you're saying, sir. In Appleton, when one of the primary economic drivers left, we lost a lot of revenue to the city, not necessarily in tax contributions, but in other services that we were collecting, permitting and other things, which offset how much we're put on a levy. We're kind of in a transition period. We have some TIFs and tax abatements that are going to slowly start coming off of the tax levy, along with some debt service that is on the tax levy that hasn't yet fallen off, which will also help us with our tax rate. Also, this is probably the first year, and you know, Andrew, you mentioned something last time that we were together, that it felt as though the budget for the ambulance is being targeted, and I'm sorry that it feels that way. But there's a lot of areas in the city that I'm kind of like being told, hey, please go and look at this budget, Willie, because this is your #1 job, to find a way to respond to the taxpayers here and how we get the budget under control. So one thing, for example, that has never been done here, there was no budget tracking. There was no justification for why something gets budgeted for. So what that means is, if there's a decision to put something on a tax levy which taxpayers are going to pay for, there was no rationale for that. So taxpayers were just paying for it without anybody telling why they're paying for it. So a lot of my job has been to kind of peel the onion back and find out why we're paying for certain things when we don't have, like, so for example, the maintenance of this hall, the budgeted amount in past years has been much higher than what we've actually spent out in fixing the hall. And the argument has been, well, what if something happens? Well, something is happening. You're creating an economic adverse event by putting something on the taxpayers that has not been planned or justified. So to answer to summarize kind of all of these bubbles in one, there has been a combination of factors that has led to the tax rate being where it is, and we're working desperately to try to bring it under control.
Anybody else?
I have to agree with Gary. I couldn't understand a lot of what you were saying.
I'm sorry.
In regards to public comment as well. Now, I've got a letter, an official response from the hospital and hospital board to the events of last council meeting on July 15th. Will you permit me to read that? If not, I want that officially entered into the record and printed with the minutes from this meeting.
It's public comment. You can comment.
I can read it?
Certainly.
Okay. Because it does not, closer? It does not have any bearing or relationship to the transfer of the ambulance to the hospital. But I will read the letter in its entirety. It's addressed to Willie Morales, City Administrator, and goes on to read, Dear Mr. Morales, Lori Andreas, Chief Executive Officer, CEO of the Appleton Area Health, is well respected in this community and has spent her professional career building a positive reputation. During Ms. Andreas' tenure as CEO of Appleton Area Health, we have seen numerous successes throughout our organization. This includes making Appleton Area Health an innovative leader in healthcare to our region, developing a team that continually strives to provide trusted, compassionate, specialized care, fostering a positive and progressive culture that has unmatched provider and staff commitment, as well as providing her abilities to make Appleton Area Health a financially sound organization. It has come to our attention that during the City Council meeting held on July 15th, 2020, there were inaccurate, unfounded, and malicious comments made regarding Ms. Andreas. Unfortunately, these comments have been shared publicly via social media. Comments such as these are not only false, but also damaging to both her personally and professionally, her character. As chair of the Appleton Area Health Board of Directors, I am incredibly disappointed in this behavior. Comments such as these are neither professional nor productive in forming a positive working relationship with the City of Appleton and its representatives. The Appleton Area Health Board of Directors kindly requests the formal apology from the City Administrator Willie Morales, Mayor Dan Tossel, and Councilman Jason Heineke for their extremely unprofessional behavior be extended immediately to Ms. Andreas, as well as shared publicly via social media. We feel this is an appropriate action for all the parties and individuals involved, and to move past this grievous error in judgment and forward in a positive manner. And it continues on to give my contact information, phone number, as well as email, excuse me, email address, and my signature at the bottom. That is our official response. My personal response is, I guess, I would have to say I'm also very disappointed, not primarily in the fact that this was not an isolated incident. It's something that seems to be a continuing trend of behavior from our city administrator, to be abusive, judgmental, demeaning, very unprofessional in his dealings with not only our hospital administrator, but with other individuals whom which the city has to interact. And my fear going forward is that we're going to establish the idea that this is an acceptable behavior by people in leadership positions within our city. And I hope this is not the case, and I'm hoping that this can be corrected and relationships can be worked to improve. So, that concludes my response from the hospital board. On the ambulance perspective, I do have a question. There is a $100,000 endowment that I am assuming will follow the ambulance. This is proceeds from the sale of the prison at the time that was sold to Prairie Correctional Facility. And I do not know, but I know at one time the council was levying annually for a capital improvement fund for the ambulance service, which primarily was designated for the purchase of a new ambulance every 9 years. If that is the case, there should be a pool of money that has been building since 2017, and I feel that that should also follow the ambulance as it moves under the hospital's management. So, I don't know if you have any response to that or any knowledge of that or not.
Absolutely. If I find information about this endowment, it'll absolutely be part of the transfer.
You wanna, okay.
I looked at all the tax papers and everything that was on the agenda. Could you break it down? What would we personally, what does that mean for our property taxes? What's the dollar amount difference between prior years to this year? It'll help us understand more what's going on versus just a percentage, if it could be broke down.
If you don't mind, share with me your estimated property value, and I'll calculate it right now.
I want to say right around 45,000.
Okay. Give me a second, please.
I think there's also a handout here that would help as well, that you can have my copy. It's available online, but
Is it all right if I address this now? Is it all right if I address this now then? So these are using the figures that I used originally from 2019's tax rate, if you will. So without including the state's portion and any homestead exclusions or any of that, the original bill at 1% that is allowed for the tax capacity would be multiplied by 205.6274%, which would give you 925. Without the ambulance service on that levy, the difference would be 827 on that particular home value, without including the homestead exclusion. No problem, thank you.
Anyone else? No.
So, I hear a lot of questions about employee stuff and all that thing, which is all important. It's
Would
all
you
very
mind,
important.
would you mind like stating your name, please?
My name is Georgia McCroy. I am a relatively new resident to Appleton. I moved here September of 2018. One of the things I asked and checked into when we moved here, because we retired to Appleton on purpose, okay, was the ambulance service and the emergency services available here. At that time, we did not know where we were gonna be doctoring and stuff, and one of the questions I asked was if I had an ambulance pick me up in Appleton, would it take me to a different hospital if that's what I wanted them to do? I was told they would. I don't know how this change is going to affect us as users of the service. Is anything gonna change in the service capacity? You know, I know the dollars are important, but to me, it's worth, it seems to me that the services are working. And I know that you guys are trying to save tax dollars. I just think that taxes are part of my social responsibility to keep my society and my community running. So that's not the important part to me. The important part to me is maintaining the quality of care and the people who are volunteering on this service. I don't know how they're compensated or if they're compensated. If they have to change over, a lot of those people may go away. And then are we gonna have enough people to man that service? And how is it going to affect me as the woman who's standing with my husband who needs medical care? So, you know, all of these other issues that you guys have talked about today, totally important. I'm concerned about the end user of the service.
Thank you.
My name's Drew Tossel. I'm a resident of Appleton. First of all, I'd like to tell the city council, I think you're doing a great job. I think there's an underlying group of people in this community that appreciate what you did. It's too bad you couldn't have started this 40, 50 years ago. The other thing I'd like to bring up is there's a lot of talk about the ambulance. And what really upsets me is the animosity between the ambulance, the hospital, all these departments. All you need to know is the city of Appleton owns all this. And the only 5 people that are elected here are these people right here. And the buck stops there. And I see a bunch of bickering, whining going on between these departments, and I'm getting sick of it. And my brother-in-law Joe runs a multi-million-dollar company. I asked him, how do you handle it? He said, well, I have department heads, engineering, production. We have our meeting. And he said, I invite controversy of ideas. We talk about everything. But he said, in the end, when it's all done, it's my decision, my company. But they put influence or injection into what we're doing. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. He said, sometimes it's a capital issue, or I don't want to risk the capital, but it's my decision. But when I implement a program, and I tell that department head, you make this happen, you make it happen. Well, I said, what if they decide not to show up at the meeting, or they don't like the idea? He said, first of all, I hired them. When I implement it, you make it happen. You don't make it happen, you won't be there. You don't show up at a meeting, it's insubordination. He said, you don't micromanage. And he said, if I have a meeting and all my engineers come, I got one or two. I don't want to talk to a dozen people. You represent those people. You figure out what you're gonna do. When you come here, you have your solutions or your grievances that were decided right there. But the way this thing's going on, the news media, the press is ridiculous. And I know you have to make hard decisions, make them. That's what you're elected to do. This wishy-washy, how do you feel about this? Get your big boy and girl pants on and do what you're supposed to do. Run this as a business, because that's what this is. Probably a $10 million business. It's the biggest business that most likely any of you will ever run. And it's a big responsibility. And you are obligated to the taxpayer. Some of these people are taxpayers, that's fine. But in the end, you're the people that are gonna be the ones making the decision and be answering to the taxpayer. Not these people. They don't like it, they can leave, get a different job, do whatever. You know, and maybe you need to give these people PRA. You know, do some things for them. Most people would be in favor of that. But this idea that the hospital's money is separate from the ambulance is separate from the city, is ridiculous. This whole thing is owned and operated by the city of Appleton. And you guys control all of it. So my expectation is you step up to the plate, make the hard decisions, and make sure the people that are supposed to do what you want them to do, carry it out. I mean, that's what's expected out of your management level people. That's why they're not union. If they can't get the job done, get somebody that can. Thank you.
Anybody else?
My name's Gary Borsted. I've lived in Appleton 72 years. I sat on this council for 8 years. This is not an easy job, and until all of you out there have taken a shot at this, I'll tell you what, it's totally different. If you think it's fun, sign up. You're gonna please maybe half the people sometimes, maybe 75% of the people sometimes. You're always gonna get somebody mad. There's no doubt about it. It's a thankless job that they're doing, and they're doing a good job. Like Drew said, the buck stops here. It doesn't stop up the street, over there. I don't know what Danielle was all talking about. I guess I'll find out.
Sorry.
I was on the fire department for 23 years. We were total volunteer, 24/7, 365 days a year we were on call. We go when they call, that's all it was. We were covered under the city's insurance policy, like I presume everybody else that's a volunteer that works through the city. We did get a retirement, and our retirement come from 2% money from the insurance. So we didn't do it for the money. We done it for the community. I live here, I'm gonna help and do whatever I can to help this community go. Otherwise, I would've left a long time ago. But it's a good place to raise kids. Both of mine moved back from Minneapolis and moved back to Appleton to live here and raise their families. And like they say, the bickering and that stuff, it's gotta stop. Because you tell them this is the job, this is what you're gonna do, whether it's the fire chief or whether it's people with the ambulance or people up to the hospital. Like Drew says, the buck stops there. So if any of you figure you can do that much better of a job, by God, sign up this fall, run for city council, tell everybody you're gonna change everything in the world, and all of a sudden it doesn't work that way. So I think they're doing a fine job. They're doing the best of their ability, and they're gonna come up here and they're going to work for the taxpayer of Appleton. That's the only ones that matter. If you're not a taxpayer, you're not a resident, you're out of luck. We're the ones that are footing the bill. So the decision lies with these people. and they're going to make the decision for the well-being of Appleton. I thank you for the time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name's Nicholas Mose. I'm an EMT here in Appleton, live here in Appleton. Mayor Tossel, what were you doing on Christmas Day?
Playing with my grandkids.
That's great. I was driving to Sioux Falls taking an injured person. 8 hours. 8 hours. I didn't get to see my kids open presents. I didn't get to have Christmas dinner because I had to stay within city limits, and I was going to Sioux Falls. And I'm not expecting a thank you in return, but what I am asking is that you give some respect to the people that have put a lot of time and effort and have seen things that you don't want to see and that they don't want to see, that they have nightmares because of, because they are psychologically changed forever. And that goes for all of the council members. You have to think about the respect. And there's been a theme today about respect. One person said, there's not a lot of respect, there's a lot of bickering, and there's a lot of things going on in departments. That's because it was a lack of respect. I served in the military. Respect is earned. You have not earned my respect because you choose to not listen, and you choose not to hear, and you choose to go forward without being educated. One question you asked Mayor Tossel last session was, or you said something to the effect of, I don't even know how the ambulance services run. What questions were asked to the ambulance service between last week and now? Do you know how we're run still? You don't, because you didn't ask. So what we are asking and what we are saying as an ambulance crew, and I think I speak for most of it when I say this, we are not opposed to going to the hospital. We've never been opposed to going to the hospital. If the timing was right and the resources were right to give the residents of this area, and not only this area, but a 400 square mile radius, the care and services that they deserve. Because they deserve it. So instead of voting something tonight and then giving the good faith that we will change it if we need to, why don't you show some good faith and actually table it, have a discussion? Because you can, as was brought up, you're the end buck. You could come up next session and you could say, no, we've tried to do something, it still hasn't worked, we're gonna move forward. I think everyone wants to come forward and wants to come to the table and are willing to come to the table, but the table needs to be available. There is no table. There has been no table up until this point. That's what we're upset about. That's what bothers the people that give time and effort and psychological health and physical health to make sure that if you fall off of a roof, someone's there within 5 minutes. So think about that.
Can I get another minute?
Go ahead.
It was 8 hours going to Sioux Falls and back. I stood out west of town here for 3 days. 3 days fighting fire out there. We're out in the woods, out in the trees, out in the damn swamp. I got hit with fire retardant from the airplane that flew in from wherever. I don't think anybody walked up to me and said thank you. I really don't. They just kind of expected it, and if you're here to listen to somebody pat you on the back and say good job, sit and think about it for a while. You volunteered. I volunteered to be on the fire department. We had 2 years like that. We fought fires for over 2 days. 3 days on that last big one, 2 days on this one out here. Did I get home? No. Was I out there? You bet. Was I out there the whole time? You bet. So 8 hours isn't that bad.
Thank you for your
Okay, let's move on here now.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
That's all right, you can have it as you can. Thank you.
The resolution, Andrea Block from the Appleton Ambulance. The resolution that's posted online, is that the final resolution? It is as written?
Yep.
Is there gonna be any funding from the city for the hospital for that?
They're going to be voting on that after.
Yeah, we'll vote on the amount.
So we should just, that's scary to believe. Somebody made a comment about the news media being ridiculous, which possibly it is, I don't know. But without the news media, the people in this town know nothing of what's going on because there is no discussion had at this table. Andrew, last week you told me if I don't have anything I need to talk about, I don't need to discuss it. In that video clip of you three, it was clear that your plan to vote was last week. You had already had the discussion and you already had your minds made up. So the discussion is happening, but it's not at this table, so how is the public supposed to hear it? I would like to see this whole resolution be tabled for tonight, form a subcommittee, let the discussions happen, put it on the preliminary tax levy, because you can always take it off before your final one. But once you send your preliminary, you can't add it back on, is that correct? Does it hurt the preliminary tax levy to have the ambulance on there, as long as it's not the final one?
No.
So does this have to be rushed through and be voted on tonight?
Well, if we're at after the preliminary one, you're going to vote it through possibly. I don't know.
I will make a motion to vote on it tonight.
I don't understand what the big concern about this money is. When that hospital ran out of money, you guys dumped $700,000, 800,000 or whatever it is in there. And we all need the ambulance. I don't know why you people keep thinking you're gonna run out of money.
Who's thinking we're gonna run out?
Well, you're worried about the $30,000. You think they're not gonna take care of the ambulance?
I simply asked if that was gonna be put in the resolution.
Well, I don't get this. The city owns all of this. They own the hospital. If they decide that they wanna pay the ambulance out of the liquor store or liquor off sale, they can. Or they can decide to tell the hospital, you're gonna pay for the ambulance. That's their decision to make. They manage the money. You people don't. But have you ever not had enough money to run the ambulance?
Please don't refer to me as you people. I'm simply here as this.
Oh, now we're down to, well, you're part of the ambulance, right? That's what I should say. The ambulance assumes they're not gonna get the money. You must be worried about it and keep bringing it up.
Let's move on here now. We don't need to get this heated.
Well, I just don't get this. You guys are in control of the money, you run the budget, do what needs to be done. I doubt very seriously that you're gonna let the ambulance not have gas and not be able to function and not work. And it keeps getting brought up. I read it in the news feed, that there's big concerns about money. So somebody's writing this stuff. So.
Hi, my name is Michelle Kranz. I'm a citizen of Appleton. I pay taxes. Most people in this room do. So we talk a lot about who's managing money, but how about who's managing our city manager? Those comments about Lori were absolutely disrespectful, rude, and should be a thought for the mayor and the council to make a vote to see if your job is still valuable here. Your job as a city manager is to take care of the citizens of this town, to think about them, and to provide input, but not make the decisions for the mayor or city council. I would like you guys to think about this because I don't feel comfortable with you, I don't trust you, and I'm pretty positive don't feel like you're managing the city very well. Our city deserves more. Thank you. Oh, I have one more thing. And over all of this, and all of the comments that have been brought up, not once have you apologized yet.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Carrie. I'm on the ambulance. Sorry. Now can you hear me?
Yep.
It's hard to know how to stand up here and what to say. I have talked to Jay, I have talked to Andrew. I have listened to what a lot of these guys have to say out here. And part of it has to do with money, part of it has to do with respect. Back that up. A lot of it has to do with respect. And if things had been started differently and handled differently and brought to us differently, this would be a whole different ballgame. And I'm not sure how you as elected officials don't think that's important. Because that's right now, that's how we are feeling, that it isn't important. And I'm pretty sure Nick stood up here and did not ask to be thanked. He just stood up here and said, this is what we do. And it shouldn't be that hard to have some of that respect. Because it isn't easy what we do. And this transition is not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of steps that involve. And to say, well, come December, if it's not gonna work, we can backtrack, but you really can't. Once the ball gets rolling and some of the things are done, you can't undo those because other things aren't going to work. It has to be an all or nothing in my book. And if there is concerns and there's things that aren't ready and don't think they're gonna be ready, then to me, you don't move forward until you're sure that they are.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No one out in the hall? That's it? Okay. I'll move on to resolution 2020-23.
Motion to adopt resolution 2020-23, transferring the administration of the Appleton Ambulance Service over to the Appleton Area Health, effective January 1st, 2021.
I'll second.
Motion has been made by Councilor Heineke and seconded by Councilor Schmidt to transfer the hospital, or the ambulance to the Appleton Hospital, January 1, 2020. Will there be any discussion?
I would like to say something. I'm just going to reiterate what I spoke of at the last meeting. I do hear and empathize with both sides. I think that there should also be a subdivision meeting with the hospital, the ambulance, and a couple of council members, due to the fact that as the questions were read by our city attorney, not everything has been answered. And I agree, in the end, we should move under the Appleton Hospital, but I do feel like there needs to be some very distinct parameters. As the hospital had voiced before, if they didn't feel like they were ready, January 1st of 2021. In fact, I believe that they had indicated October. There is no distinct guideline as to what that would be. What does that look like? Like I said, I'm not opposed to it, but you're gonna have new council members. I know you can make amendments, but I would rather have documentation and things written so it is more black and white. I don't feel like we're ready to vote on this tonight for that reason. appreciate the ambulance. They have given many years of service. I have worked with dozens of them over my years, and it isn't a job for everybody, and they should be commended for what they do, as well as the fire department, any volunteer service. So again, I feel like it is my obligation as a council person to hear what they have to say and try to answer the questions to 100% if we can. There's questions that still need to be answered even by the hospital. So I don't feel like there should be a vote tonight. I would also like to table it. I don't want to sit on it for months and months. If we have to have another meeting next week, so be it. If we have to have another meeting the week after that, so be it. I'm willing to do that, but I do feel like it's our obligation as the city council to, you know, answer the questions that are still not answered.
Mr. Mayor, I have a point of order. Do you really think that you should be voting on this? You have those family members that work at the hospital. Do you think you have an unbiased opinion on this?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
So you have no influence by your family at all?
No. You know, and just in response to that, probably my thought process, this is medical. The ambulance is a medical entity, and I have a medical background, so these gentlemen are more financial, and that's where we differ, but that's where I feel like our views are important. My views are just as important as theirs, and I'm not saying that I don't have the same end goal, because I do think that the ambulance should move under the hospital for the reasons that have been stated. I just would like to see a little bit more time. I would like to vote on it in August, to be honest with you. This doesn't have to drag out, but it does have to be respectful and answer the questions that are still unanswered.
I think a lot of the questions aren't going to be answered until it's in.
Well, then we're not working hard enough.
I just want to make one comment. I've talked to most of the ambulance crew, not everybody. I've talked to past mayors, I've talked to past people that have been on the ambulance. I've ridden in the ambulance, they saved my life 25 years ago. I do have a lot of respect for you people, even though I think some of you think I don't. I do. This is a very heartfelt decision for me, but I feel it's for the best of the greater of Appleton. That's my comment.
If it's the best for Appleton, then why don't we take our time and make the right decisions and be on board both sides? Both sides have asked you to just take your time. We have till, what was it, September, October, I believe? So why not wait till August? Why don't you do what's right by the city? What's right by the citizens? That's what most of us are looking for. You know, we know what in the end is going to happen.
Can you come up to the mic if you're gonna talk, please?
I apologize for talking back there. I know in the end, we all know what's probably going to happen, and maybe it's the best. What we're looking for, I think, as a community, is that it is discussed. I love what Amber just said. It needs to be talked about, needs to be discussed. The way it's happening, we feel like it's being forced on our throats. And I think we just need to know that all the questions have been answered. I think that's only fair to the community, because we haven't heard a whole lot about any of it, except the bad stuff. So, you know, we'd like to hear the good stuff too.
Any other discussion?
Did you have a question back there?
More of a comment. Matt Tollefson again. Mayor Tossel, I think you had a good idea on Monday, or trying to get the small group together on Monday. I think the execution of it and, you know, making a formal motion to refer this to a committee of 6, 2 members of city council, 2 members of the hospital, 2 members of the ambulance crew would be very appropriate. I think that was your intention for Monday. if there's no rush to get this done right now, I don't see why we can't carry that forward. And doing it with a formal motion so that there's actually an actual extension and a charge for this committee moving forward. You know, I think Councilmember Molden, as the ambulance liaison, would be a good person to chair that committee, personally. That's just a recommendation from a citizen here. But I think it was a great idea that you had for Monday. But if there's no rush, I don't see why we can't continue it. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll take it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'm opposed.
Motion carries. Transfer funds.
I'll motion to transfer the Appleton Area Health the amount of $40,000 to assist with the transferring of the Appleton ambulance service by offsetting potential net income losses from the launch of the ambulance service as a business unit of Appleton Area Health, and for said transfer not to be executed prior to January 1st, 2021.
I second.
Motion has been made and seconded to give the hospital $40,000 in assistance for the loss. It's usually been, what did it track, at $30,000 a year loss. So we thought if it'd help with management or help paying there. Is there any other discussion?
Was there a second?
I
Is there-
second.
Yeah, you
Oh.
seconded.
Is this just 1 year, or,
Um,
1 year.
so about the years after that?
The years after that, them being a unit of the hospital is to submit their capital and operational requests to the city for consideration of the levy certification. There's no need to consider it separately. Unless the city council would like to do that.
I mean, shouldn't it be something, I mean, if it's a loss, I mean, every year it should be addressed. I mean, it's just, we gotta make sure that the management of it is correct, you know what I mean, that we track it, but, I mean, I'd like to, if it runs at a loss, it should be covered by the general. I mean, we can take it out of general funds on the city side and it doesn't affect our tax rate.
No, it doesn't affect your tax rate, but as our audits have indicated, transferring too often from the general fund will come up as negative balance transfers on our audits, and it will affect our bonding rates down the line if we do it too frequently. So even those decisions, these constraints are very real. We have to be very careful how we do these things. With that being said, if you'd like to do it on an annual basis, then that's something that would have to come before the city council anyway, when the hospital wants to consider any sort of capital items or initiatives that they need help from the city with.
I mean, didn't you say like 5 years running, it was like $30,000 loss, wasn't it? I mean, it went between 80 and 20 and, correct? Or, I mean, I just think we should, I mean, I'd budget whatever loss, but I don't know how to do that
I'd be
the
more
correct way.
comfortable looking at the numbers next year and seeing how it's doing and looking at it again next year.
Well, like you say, we got elections and we got a new council, I suppose they can just abolish what we've done here, and I mean, then they can, what, right, or give them, I don't know.
If you're asking me, what I think I'm hearing is you're asking whether or not the decision can be reversed. I think so, yes, potentially, but there is already a mechanism for this. The wheel has already been invented. The hospital would submit the request that they have, which would include the ambulances to be considered.
So it would be funding from us right to them, I mean, it would be here, but
Right.
then we budget for it every year then, is what you're saying.
When they come with whatever it is that they may or may not need, it would include the ambulance now.
So the hospital can request monies at a later date if they see losses or
Yep.
hardship.
Right now, we're in the budget process. I have an Excel of capital items that the hospital desperately needs, that as soon as I finish going through the formal departments of the city, I would like to bring to the city council. But again, I know it seems like longer, but I've only been here since September 26. We're still in the budget process.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. City council appointment.
We have somebody willing to do an interim.
Yeah, Chad Silty said he would do it, and he's been mayor before, and he's been on the hospital board. I just thought he'd probably be a good one to fill in till we have elections. I don't know anybody else, I mean, that's who I came up with, and he was willing to take it, so.
Is that something we should advertise at all, or ask for, or no?
No, there were some considerations. Mr. Tollefson back there was submitted to the mayor to consider as well.
And yeah, I had a couple others, but I mean, if Chad, I just thought he was experienced, I mean, what we've been doing, just to fill out the last of Tori's deal, so that's kinda who I'm recommending.
He's just filling out to the end of the year, Dan, though,
Yeah,
correct?
and then
That's
as
not-
soon as
the
elections,
election.
he doesn't fill out her whole term.
Right.
Right.
Just, yep, till elections.
I'm comfortable with that. He has good experience.
Motion to appoint Mr. Chad Silty to serve on the Appleton City Council to fill the vacancy until special election takes place in November.
I'll second.
Motion has been made and seconded to have Chad Silty sit in on Tori's vacant spot till the elections in November. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Acquiring parcel.
So, in speaking with our county auditor, the parcel in question does have a market value of $29,700. She wanted to be successfully reviewed by the county commissioners, and because it is not a parcel to be demolished, we have to provide some money that allows us to use it for economic development purposes. So if you get something for $1, for example, it's because of blighted reasons. So you're gonna tear it down. But since it still has market value, the request is to consider paying more than that $1. Now, I just had a chance the other day to go in there. There's no way that it's worth $29,700. There's just no way. And Kim was with me as well, and so she's gonna be probably proposing that we offer somewhere in the area of $5,000 for the parcel.
What are they gonna do with this restaurant? What is the city going to do with this property?
We're gonna put it for sale and hope that we can get that expeditiously done, because we know how important it is to the community
Yeah, that's
to,
on the main drag.
you know, I know.
On it. Yep.
And I'd like to see it sold for whatever we pay. We don't need to make a large profit on it. I think the goal is just to get a business in there.
Just get a business
So
in
to
there to
start
clean
them
it
at
up.
the lowest purchase price possible would be ideal.
As mentioned by the audience, it is on the main drag, and our town curb appeal is relying on that.
Is part of that money that they're getting, is that part of the tax money you got too?
Excuse me?
Is part of that money that they're giving up the tax forfeiture, part of that money is the city money, right?
Yes. In the aggregate, I would say yes.
You know, is there any way you can give them that money in your tag, if you use that money to tear some other buildings down?
We are already in a formal demolition program, and we're very fortunate and happy to the commission that we are in that program.
We have a motion?
I'll motion to allow the city administrator offer to Swift County an amount not to exceed $29,700 for the purchase of parcel 22-0921-000.
I'll second.
Motion has been made and seconded to make an offer on the property. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Are we on to the grant one?
Motion to allow the mayor and city administrator to sign the small cities grant state contract.
I'll second.
Motion has been made and seconded to sign the city's grant. Any other discussion?
Want to give us a brief overview of that?
Sure, we were approved by deed. We've been signing a lot of things, so I can appreciate why everybody's confused. So first you sign to say you accept the grant, and then the state says, here's the contract for how you will administer that grant. And so this is what we're doing now.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Cheers.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the Wednesday, July 22nd, 2020 special meeting.
Second?
Motion has been made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.